Welcome to Kfarhay Capital Radio, Mount Lebanon, the voice of the free Christian Mount Lebanon. I'm your host, Fred, and I'm glad you're with us. Before we begin, I want to dedicate tonight's podcast to my eldest son, who is starting his long journey to learn about his Maronite and Mount Lebanese roots. May he have a long and happy life under the watchful eyes of our Lord and Savior, Jesus Christ. With love from your Papa. Tonight's episode is about something bigger than politics. It's about memory, identity, and return. My guest is Clay Hanna and his son Henry. So I'd rather say my guests are Clay Hanna and his son Henry. Clay is an American and a father of five, a man of faith, and a descendant of Maronite immigrants from Mount Lebanon. Clay's family story reflects one of the great waves of Mount Lebanese immigration in the early 1900s, when our people left their homeland and many arrived in the United States through Ellis Island. Before I begin with the questions, I want to read a passage from my upcoming book that's entitled The Untold Story of the Lebanese Christians, From Phoenician and Aramean Origins to Modern Times. I'm going to read an excerpt from chapter 24 of my book. The chapter is entitled The Mutasarrifiyya, Part 1, Christian Rule and Cultural Transformation, 1861 to 1914, The Great Migration, a Bleeding Mountain. Alongside cultural change came demographic upheaval. Starting in the late 19th century and accelerating between 1900 and 1915, an estimated 100,000 citizens emigrated from Mount Lebanon, roughly a quarter of the population at the time. They went to Egypt, drawn by its openness under British rule, as well as to North and South America, seeking freedom and opportunity. Many hoped to escape high Ottoman taxes, economic instability, and the suffocating feudalism of their home villages. The remittances sent home helped sustain families and build schools and churches. But the human cost was steep. The exodus left behind the elderly, the poor, and the devout. It accelerated the erosion of communal cohesion and deepened the divide between mountain and metropolis. This is not an abstract history. This is the human background of Clay's story and of countless families across our diaspora. The purpose of this conversation is simple and serious: to shed light on the vast Mount Lebanese Maronite diaspora and on a principle we believe deeply, that the right to return to ancestral land does not expire, even after generations. For Maronites of Mount Lebanon, identity is not a costume you put on and take off. It is inheritance, carried by blood, carried by family, and carried by responsibility. Clay has made a deliberate decision to reconnect with his Maronite roots, not only for himself, but with his children. And tonight, we'll let his testimony tell a larger story. What was lost, what can be recovered, and what return can look like in real life, spiritually, culturally, and practically. Clay, welcome. Start by telling us, who are you and what brought you back to your Maronite roots?
Thank you, Fred. Hi. Wow, that was amazing. I look forward to reading your book, because you've said and described so much about my own family's experience. It's really incredible. I am, as you stated, I'm a father of five. I'm living now in Norfolk, Virginia, and we have been researching for the last several years, trying to understand more about our history as a family. I grew up in Florida with my six siblings, and I was born the son of Anthony and Paige Hanna. My dad, Anthony, was a landscaper. He was studied agriculture and loved plants and taking care of God's creation. And I spent a lot of time with him doing that growing up. But as I got older, I had questions about where his family was. There was a disconnect, partly because my grandfather and my grandmother had gotten a divorce, and also my grandfather passed away relatively young. And I think that had a pretty significant impact on my father, because he really did not talk much about his dad, and it seemed like he knew very little of his past. I learned later part of the reason for that is because his mother was not very fond of, after their divorce, was not very fond of the Hanna side of the family. And I just learned in the last few years that I had aunts and uncles and great aunts and great uncles in the country that I had never met and didn't know at all. And so my siblings and I sort of started, this is probably 10, 15 years ago, probably 10, 15 years ago, just starting to try to piece together who we were, and where we had come from, because my dad wasn't really in a position to tell us, and my grandfather had passed away, and so we went to kind of the big turning point for us was when we went to my great aunt Marion's home in Ithaca, New York. Now, I had been up to visit Ithaca a number of times, and but we had never met her before. And she, as often are, she's the older sister of my grandfather and the sort of family keeper of the history. And my siblings and I were able to sit with her for about an hour, and as she started to tell us little things, bits and pieces about who we were. And I got to admit, I think initially, like when I thought of Lebanon, I just thought of the Middle East, and I think I even would say that I thought that I was Arab, because I didn't know anything about the Maronites. I didn't really know the history of Lebanon. It was conflicting for me because my parents had raised us as Christians, as Protestants. We read the Bible. We were devout, but I didn't have any understanding that was not something that had just come along in our family. So as we sat with my great aunt, who was probably in her 80s at that time, she started to tell us about Lebanon and about being Maronite, and letting us know that we were not, in fact, we were not did not have a Muslim heritage, that we did not have an Arab heritage, that we had a long history of with the Maronite Church. And she told us that, in fact, that my great grandfather, who had first come to this country in 1904, that he was an altar boy in the church, and that his grandfather was actually a deacon or a priest. I'm not quite sure which in the Maronite Church. That was really kind of astounding to all of us, because unfortunately my grandmother didn't really, she was Jewish, and I think had kind of done her best to orient my dad and orient the rest of us away from Christianity, somewhat understandably so, and towards her Jewish heritage, which again, I don't fault her for that, but I think some of that, as I said, is also just the relational difficulties between her and my grandfather, and her kind of not wanting to remember the Hanna side of the family fondly. So, but as I said, for my Christian brothers and sisters and I, it was kind of a remarkable thing for us to realize that we had a Christian heritage, because up until that point, we had kind of been under the impression that we were the first generation of Christians in our family. And, I was, some people wear that as a badge of honor, as they should. But I got to admit that that did not sit as well with me. And I was greatly encouraged by the fact that there was a heritage of faith in my family. That really meant a lot to me and to my brothers and sisters. And I think part of that is just because we didn't know much about our past. So my great aunt Marian also told us that my great grandfather was born in 1889, and she thinks that he was born in Ashash. One of the things that the little tidbits that we had kind of discovered but couldn't really make sense of is that people had told us, or we had heard, that we were from the hills, or that our family was hill people, or things like that, and we didn't really know what to make of that. But after that, I started looking into maps of Lebanon and looking at going on Google and trying to figure out where things were, and it started to make a little bit more sense, just why that was, as I looked at the geography of Lebanon. But both my on my maternal side, my great grandmother was her name was last name was Nojim or Najam. This is unverified, but we think that she's somewhere from more the central part of Mount Lebanon. I don't know whether she was Maronite, but we think she was around someplace called Jaj. I don't know if I'm pronouncing that right, J-A-J. And her father owned olive groves. That's the other little tidbit we were told. My on my great grandfather's side, he was a successful merchant, is what we had been told. And it's remarkable what people were brave enough to do back in that time. My aunt told us that, it wasn't necessarily because of economic circumstances that my great grandfather came over. He was pretty young. He was only 14, but he wanted adventure. He knew a lot of people that had come over, and actually, his father had helped a lot of people to come over. So I think, in whatever role he played in the community, he obviously had some financial resources and had helped a number of people to be able to come over to the U.S. And a lot of them had settled into Utica, New York. And so finally, the family lore is that finally, he convinced his parents, my great grandparents, to let him come over, and they put him on the boat, and he was sent over to New York. Couldn't speak any English. There's a story about that him. The only thing he could say was his name, and which was Anthony Hanna Wibby, and the fact that he was trying to go to Utica, New York. And so, with that information, the police officer that he encountered in New York City was able to direct him up to Utica, where he met up with some of his father's friends that they had apparently helped to make their way to the United States. And I believe there's still a thriving Lebanese community in Utica. There's been two Hannas in New York politics that have been successful. Richard Hanna, which is my dad's second cousin. So my grandfather's brother, I believe. And he was a congressman. And then kind of famous, there's a famous mayor of Utica, New York, Eddie Hanna. Again, people that I had never met and didn't really know anything about, but we found out later on after the fact. Go ahead.
Let me interrupt you here because there's so much to unpack.
Yeah.
Okay, and I want to start. I've taken a lot of notes, and I want to start with your watershed moment between you and your siblings and your great aunt in New York.
Yes.
So my first question is, what was your great aunt's name?
Marion.
Okay, Miriam, as in Mary.
Yes.
Okay,
yes.
Got you. All right, Miriam. All right, so was that your watershed moment? This is when you got the full, I would say, you managed to fill some gaps in your history, in your Maronite Mount Lebanese history?
Yes. That was the first time that we learned that we were from Maronite heritage.
Wow. Okay, this is...
Yeah. So it was a really big deal because we, like I said, I think in our mind, we just thought we had just been told Lebanese. We didn't really know what that meant. We, understood that was people from, and this is very, the internet was certainly available, but it wasn't, there wasn't as much information out there This is like probably in the very beginning of like Ancestry.com. So,
okay, so how long ago was it, that meeting with your great aunt Miriam?
let's see. So I believe it was, let's see, it was just before my second deployment to Iraq. And so that must have been in like early 2006.
Okay, so that was about 20 years ago.
Yes.
Okay, and in 20 years, how close did you get to your Maronite roots in terms of knowledge, culture, and I would say in terms of steps? Have you, aside from onboarding this knowledge, have you done anything in your family, your siblings, your children, to bring you closer to your origins?
Yes.
Okay,
So,
can you talk more about that?
yeah. So, I was, I was in the Army soon after that, and deployed a few times, and so I was pretty focused on other things. But my oldest sister, Autumn, she started to do some research. I think she kind of latched onto the fact that Miriam was the oldest sister of the Hanna family, and my oldest sister Autumn kind of occupies that position in our household. And she kind of took it upon herself to start kind of keeping notes, and so she did that for a few years. Didn't really have a lot of success in figuring out where we were from or anything like that, or what based on just the little tidbits. And I think at that point too, we didn't really, because we had been raised Protestant, we didn't really know anything about Catholicism and didn't really understand the unique place of the Maronite Church in the Catholic story. But she started doing some research, and this is probably now into like the mid 2000s. It was interesting to me to go to Iraq and knowing that there was, that my family was from there, from the Near East, and so when I came back, I wanted to know more. I've had heard Arabic spoken quite a lot. I learned about what it meant that there were Sunni Muslims and Shia Muslims, and I learned who the Kurds were, and so I had started to kind of learn different things about the region. And, but it wasn't really until not too long after that, my dad passed away.
Which year? About which year?
This was probably like, it's been, I think, 8 years now that he's been gone.
So 2018.
Yeah,
approximately.
2017, 2018,
2017.
Yeah. So I came back from, yes. So I left active duty and something around the mid 2000s, and that's when I started to really just think about what I had learned, and
how did you act on it?
So I did, honestly, I didn't really act on it. I didn't really have any idea what to do. I wasn't on Twitter. I wasn't really on Facebook. I didn't really, again, it's difficult to describe it now to my sons. There just wasn't the connections that sort of have come about over the last few years. but I'll fast forward. So, what ended up happening, and this is where we'll have to bring Henry into the conversation, is, over the next few years, Henry started to do some research, and he got on ancestry.com and started to take the research that my sister had done, and the notes that she had taken from Miriam, and as well as starting to explore religion and Catholicism himself. So, we might ask Henry, just how that was for him, because I got to give him the credit. He did a lot of the research himself.
And you're referring to Henry, your son, is that right?
Yes. Henry Hanna, my son.
Yeah, Henry, can you join us and share your experience and your work, the work that you did on ancestry.com, in terms of tying or filling the gaps, and how did ancestry.com help you get closer to your Mount Lebanese and Maronite roots? That's what our listeners are mostly interested in.
Yeah, so definitely the jumping off point for me was just listening to my dad and my aunt talk, just like my father just did, about what he had learned about my Lebanese and Maronite roots. And that was just really fascinating to me to learn more about like where I came from. I really liked the story about immigration that my father and aunt described. I think I was a young teenager, probably, and learned that, that my great grandfather, at about the same age that I had immigrated on his own from Lebanon, and I was just very impressed by that, and just over the years wanted to learn more. So I learned about ancestry.com and talked to my dad and my aunt, and started an account and just started documenting the tree and using Ancestry, but also the information that they gave me. So like we had already established many of the facts, and so I just started filling them in. And then I'm not sure how much you know about how Ancestry works, but it if you input things, it will recommend more. And so you can look at things that other people have posted or documents, census data, draft records. And so I found a lot of that information online to corroborate the stories that I had learned from my father and aunt.
Can you give us a practical example?
Yeah, so we have for my great-great-grandfather, Anthony Hanna, who immigrated. I actually have the tree pulled up right now. I have most of it is census data documenting him stating that he is from. It's actually it's documenting that he is from Mount Lebanon. He also references Syria. We had to work through that a little bit, but at one point he says specifically that he is from Mount Lebanon, that he spoke Arabic, that he immigrated in a certain year.
And so, who captured this information or this data on Ancestry on behalf of your great-grandfather?
So the census data, as far as I can understand about how Ancestry.com works, they have access to all the records, and they've sort of gone through it automatically using computers or something like that.
Okay, gotcha.
And so when you input, you start somewhere with what you know, and then it will recommend to you, like maybe this document has to do with your family, and then you review it personally to ensure that there's a real connection. So most of it was done automatically.
Okay, got you. So just to summarize, so at some point, the census authorities in New York, let's say, I imagine your great-grandfather lived in New York. They approached your grandfather and your great-grandfather, Anthony, and they asked him a series of questions that were documented in registries that were picked up by Ancestry.com and digitized. Is my understanding correct?
Yes. Yeah, that's exactly correct.
Fantastic. Okay, perfect. And how did you use this data? So you use this data to sort of ascertain what your dad and your aunts and aunties had captured in their watershed sit-down moment with the great aunt Miriam in 2006.
Yes, exactly. Yeah.
So what happened after that?
Yeah, so this was actually not too long ago. This was only a couple years ago, at the beginning of the time that I started college. So it's fairly recent for me, like in terms of like truly digging into a lot of this stuff. But after that, I was very compelled by the story and by my connection. So over the past few years, I started learning Arabic, and I'm hoping to travel to Lebanon at some point in the near future. And I've also been exploring the Catholic Church, and even more recently, I visited a Maronite church that is nearby.
Okay, perfect. This is the perfect, I would say, segue to my next question, because I wanted to ask Clay, but you mentioned that. Because I understand that you come from I would say a Protestant heritage, and you're devout Christians, and you did mention that you visited a Maronite church. Now you can answer that, and then I'm going to jump back and ask the same question to Clay. And the question is, as Protestants, as devout Protestants, how did this information about your Maronite ancestry, and I want to open a very important bracket, being of Maronite ancestry means that you're a descendant of the very first Christians from the first century, and it's documented. So your First Nations of Mount Lebanon and your First Nations of Syria. We are First Nations of Mount Lebanon and First Nations of Syria. And this is something that's not talked about enough. And we're descendants of the very first Christians that existed. This is extremely powerful. So I want to bring it back to your approaching the Maronite Church. If you could tell me more about that experience.
Yeah, definitely. Exactly as you just said, it's an incredibly powerful connection, and I think that's what I've been growing more aware of. Learning that detail that I have. It seems it's not perfectly clear, but it seems like I am descended from a Maronite priest, and as you mentioned, that ancestral connection goes even deeper to some of the first Christians, has been incredibly compelling, and it's sort of very, as my father mentioned, very affirming in the sense that I've been a very devout Christian, for my whole life, and so, irregardless of my knowledge of my connection to the Maronite Church and to Lebanon, and so learning that I also have an ancestral connection has been a really cool experience, just to know that, like, as my father said, that sort of it doesn't come from nowhere, that I am very drawn to the church and very devout, and that's actually something that goes very deep. But my father can speak more about that as well, so I'll hand it off to him.
Okay, absolutely. Thank you so much, Henry, for your testimony today. It is much appreciated. And on behalf of all the Mount Lebanon team and the team of Kfarhay Capital Radio, we wish you a great, I would say, pursuing of your ancestry. And I have no doubt that you're going to get to a point that will give you that connection, that ancestral connection. And the more you get into it, the more you're going to love it, the more you're going to cherish it. And remember that the Maronites, our ancestral language, is Syriac, which is Aramaic, the same language that Jesus spoke. And if you do remember from the Bible study, what did Jesus say on the cross? He say, God, why have you forsaken me? But he said it in Aramaic. He said, Eli, Eli, lama sabachthani. And our ancestors spoke the same language. All right, back to you, Clay. If you can share your experience on that specific topic.
So, a couple things. One, I got to admit that, initially I was a little skeptical. Again, having grown up as a Protestant, you are definitely taught to be a little suspicious of the Catholic Church. And so, I still didn't quite know what to make of this. And so when Henry started becoming more interested in the Catholic Church, as his dad, I wasn't necessarily thrilled. But I felt like I needed to learn more myself so I could at least discuss it with him. And that's when I started taking a look at what it meant to be Maronite. And because one of the criticisms I had always had for the Catholic Church was that their clergy, none of their clergy are married. And I don't know if it was Henry or my sister Autumn that kind of said, well, that's interesting that you say that. There actually is this tradition in the Maronite Church where, it is that married people can become clergy. And that we actually have somebody in our family that was, we think, clergy. And that started to get me thinking about the Apostle Paul and in Timothy, in his letter to Timothy. He talks about, to encourage Timothy, he tells him to remember the inheritance of his faith that he got from his mother and from his grandmother. And that's when it started clicking for me in a different way, that I am a recipient of an inheritance of faith that, as you mentioned, goes back to the very beginning. And that stirred something in my heart. And again, I was already a believer, but I didn't. It means something different when your ancestors take care to give you an inheritance.
Absolutely. And it's important that you mentioned, I want to add one more thing that's often overlooked, and which is the sacrifices of our ancestors.
Yes.
We've had martyrs. Our faith has been challenged over centuries, and we've been under Islamic occupation since the 8th century.
Yeah.
Since the Islamic invasions to our Christian ancestral lands.
Yeah.
And it wasn't a piece of cake.
Yeah.
We've had millions of our ancestors who gave their lives so that we can be alive today.
Yes.
So there's martyrdom and there's sacrifice. That's why I'm a very big advocate of the return to Mount Lebanon, because we cannot let all those sacrifices that allowed us to be in existence today. It is the sacrifice of many of our ancestors. And as recent for me as my great grandfather, and one day I can talk about it, who died in the Kafno genocide. So he sacrificed himself so that his two children, his two boys, could survive the famine. And because of my great grandfather's sacrifice, I exist today and my children exist today. So we have to always remember that.
Yes.
I did want to move to one ending subject, an ending question. And then I'm going to see if anybody wants to ask Clay or Henry question directly. Any of our listeners, please raise your hand and I will give you the microphone. So I would say my wrap-up question for the rapid-fire Q&A session is the following. Imagine today there's an entity, an independent country called Mount Lebanon that exists. What is your expectation as a descendant of Maronite Mount Lebanese? What is your expectation? And Henry, feel free to chime in, because that question is addressed to you as well. What's your expectation from a Mount Lebanese, a free Mount Lebanese Christian independent state?
Well, I can say I feel like I have already, my expectations have already been exceeded. And the reason for that is there is and this gets back to what we were just talking about the inheritance. My experience in my life up until this point has been not having, not inheriting. I haven't. My dad was sick and passed away relatively young. My grandfather passed away relatively young. On the male side of our family, especially, it did not seem like there was anything that had been left to me, and I had always felt like I felt the burden of trying to build that for my own children. But my view has completely changed because I realize, as you have said, that part of the story of the Maronites is holding fast, is standing against armies, against heresy, against the elements, against the powers of this world and demonic powers, and standing fast in the face of that. And so I feel like part of my role now and part of my sense of purpose now is to give to Mount Lebanon. So I feel like I owe Mount Lebanon a debt of gratitude, and I owe the Mount Lebanon Project and guys like Henry with an I, who have allowed me to feel a kinship with a land and with a people and with my ancestors that I did not think could ever be possible. And so, my expectations have already been exceeded. It's difficult to describe, like, even because, I listen on some of the spaces and things like that, even when I don't understand what's being said, because it feels familiar. And that is, a sense. There's been a sense of family in interacting with all of you guys, that is very valuable to me. And so I'm grateful. I'm thankful to God and to my great grandfather and to his father and parents, and to all of the Maronites who stood fast against the odds, and are still doing that today. And so I see my people who need me, and it's a blessing to me to even to have anything to add. And I think, in a lot of ways, I think that's an important thing. Like for those of us, for the families that were sent over or came over, I really think that for the most part, like, the purpose is, like, to do well in America or Brazil or wherever it is, so that we could help Mount Lebanon. And I feel like at this point in my life, I have skills, I have education, I have some resources, and I have family. I have 3 sons. I want to give back, and I want my sons and daughters to feel like they have roots in Mount Lebanon.
That's very touching what you said, and you spoke you spoke like a true Christian with a big Christian loving heart. Thank you so much for your testimony. I'm not done with you, but I want to circle back to Henry, to your son Henry, and ask him that question. Henry, are you with us? Yeah, I can see you.
Yeah,
unmuted
no
the
problem.
microphone.
I would love to answer that.
Yeah, and I'm not going to let you give the same answer as your dad is. I'm not going to let you say that you don't want anything, you want to give. Let's say it's a given, but what are your expectations as well? What's your vision of Mount Lebanon for you? What can it give you?
Yeah, I think I won't give it just as my father said, but just listening to what he just expressed, and thinking about the literal physical geography of Mount Lebanon, I can't help but thinking of the verse in Matthew and the Sermon on the Mount that about a city that is set on a hill, and that I think at the center of this, I would hope, is an effort in spreading the gospel and in being a Christian people. And so I would hope that Mount Lebanon could be a home for Christians in the Middle East, a safe place, which I think is sorely lacking in the Middle East. So many Christians are persecuted or are not able to easily live out the faith. And so it's incredibly aspirational for me to imagine Mount Lebanon being that kind of place in the Middle East that could be a home and a place of protection and for Christians in an area that for a long time has not been welcoming to Christians, even though it is
their ancestral lands.
Yes, exactly.
Yeah.
So that I think I would hope would be at the core of what Mount Lebanon is.
Okay, yeah. So your vision is very grand. It's very encompassing to all the Christians. It's got the land, the ancestral roots, and the safety for all Christians of the Middle East. This is great. I just want to add also to what you said, is that historically, not only Lebanon is Christian land, Syria is Christian land, Turkey is Christian land, Egypt is Christian land, all the way to Tunisia, at least. And the patriarchate of the Maronites is a patriarchate that traces its roots back to a city, a coastal city on the Mediterranean, or I'm not 100% sure if it's coastal or if it's near the Mediterranean. It's a bit further north from Lebanon, and that city is called Antioch. I'm not sure if you've heard about Antioch.
Yes, yeah.
You did. So Antioch is our Jerusalem for the Maronites, and you may want to research more about it, and I'll be more than happy to share more information about that. And I also want to bring Clay back to when he served in Iraq. So the Maronites are Syriacs. They're Syriac Aramaeans. And the Syriacs, they spread from Antioch and eastwards all the way to Mesopotamia, where Iraq is today. And there are variants of Syriacs. They're Chaldeans, they're Assyrians as well, Assyrian Christians. And I just wonder if you came across, while you were serving in Iraq, any of those Christians that do have a relationship with the Maronites as well by ethnicity. Or you only saw mosques, Sunni mosques and Shia mosques. That was it.
There only one time I did come across very briefly a man who said that he was a Christian, but that was it. It was mosques. It was the area that I was in particular was a Shia dominated area in South Baghdad, and they were the sectarian violence between the Sunnis and the Shia was really what dominated everything. There was, I think it was interesting. The Christian guy that I did come across, I couldn't tell you what his beliefs were or anything like that. And I don't even know, honestly, I don't know, because his business was selling alcohol in the black market, because there weren't any Muslims that were allowed to sell alcohol, and so that was kind of his role in the community. So again, I'm not not somebody that we probably want to claim but that was really my only experience there in about a year and a half of being there.
Yeah, I got you. So basically, you didn't stumble upon any church while you were in Basra. Okay, got you.
No.
All right. Thank you, Clay, for answering this question. I do see we have Syriac Press listening to the podcast, and I would like to invite them. Even if they want to speak in Lebanese or Arabic, they're welcome to input on the topic of the Syriac footprint. Please raise your hand if you wanna speak. إذا بتحبوا تحكوا، أنا عم بوجه السؤال لسيرياك بريس معنا. إذا حابين تحكوا عن السريان هيك دقيقتين بعطيكم الميكروفون. All right, they'd rather listen. That's totally fine. Okay, I just want to circle back to Henry Z. Henry Z, you did mention that you may want to ask a question before we wrap things up, or you did want to contribute. If you can hear me,
Shlomo Fred, Shlomo Clay, and Shlomo Henry.
Shlomo.
I don't have a question to ask, but I have something to tell. First, I want to start with a quote for Patriarch Harida. One time he said, "Israel is the birthplace of Jesus, but Lebanon is the birthplace of Christianity, and we're gonna keep it this way." And Patriarch Ostfanos Adwaihe in the 1600s, he said, Lebanon is a Maronite doctrine, which is Lebanon is the very homeland of the Maronite people. And once the Maronites leave Lebanon, Lebanon will no longer exist. Now, what I want you to do, Clay, first of all, I want to welcome you here and tell you that you're part of the family. You're not now another person or another Maronite. My dream is bigger than rebuilding the Maronite nation in Mount Lebanon, but also is to connect the Maronite across the globe, make them feel as one family nation together, regardless of the geographical location. So welcome home.
Thank you. Thank you, Henry.
And you're a brother to us. What I want to tell you is a few things. I want you to look, see if you can find if you still own a property in Lebanon.
Okay.
Because I'm very sure that you do own something. Your family still own property in Lebanon. Now we will help you to get through this. To find out who are you. Your relatives there and what you still have left in Ashesh.
Yep.
And help to try to get it back, claim that land because they are stealing our land now.
Right.
And and if you own something, I want you to, I want you to have it. And if you don't, I'm willing to give you something just, to have you there, to have you with us.
Thank you.
Secondly, my advice to you and to your son is to learn Syriac Aramaic. I'm willing to offer free lessons. And Henry, stop learning Arabic and learn Lebanese dialect. I'm serious. I will help you because learning Arabic does not, you won't be able to use it in Lebanon. It does not get you anywhere. So I will help you learn Lebanese. And this is free. You don't have to worry about, classes, something like that. I'll talk to you every day. I'll throw, some Arabic, some Aramaic, I'll let you, you learn two languages at the same time. I'm willing to help. All right.
I would love that.
That's all I have to say. And thank you guys. Thank you for being here. I'm very honored. We are very honored in Mount Lebanon. Thank you very much.
Thank
Henry,
you.
Thank you. I just want to say something before I pass on the mic to Hassan, and then it'll be a wrap. I disagree a bit with Henry Z about Henry with a Y not learning Arabic, or at least if Henry could learn Lebanese, because if he learned Syriac, that would be fantastic, because he would be able to understand the scripture, the Maronite scripture, but he won't be able to communicate if he visited Lebanon. Even if he went to Kfarhay, nobody's going to understand him if he spoke Syriac. Whereas if he spoke Lebanese, he would definitely be understood. So this is something to take into account. Hassan, the mic is yours. You have 2 minutes, and then we'll wrap it up. Thank you.
Well, thank you, Shlomo. Thank you, Henry. Thank you, Clay. We are honored, honestly. And I have a question for Henry Jr., if we can call him Henry Jr. What do you think
Clay
is a good...
Jr.
I'm sorry, Clay Jr. Clay Jr. What do you think it's a good strategy to reach the young population of Maronite origin like you, who were disconnected from this, if I want to say, faith or culture, or did you ever think about it, how to reach other young people
Yeah,
like you? Yeah,
it's been
yeah.
a bit on my mind. Honestly, I have to be honest. I'm not sure, because I think what's been really compelling to me is to hear this originally from my father and aunt. So that is really was sort of the starting point for me. Was it's sort of being a relational thing, but I think spreading awareness about what the Maronite identity means. I mean, I can tell you, like, I did not, as similar to what my father was, I did not really know what the Maronite Church was. Just as an American, I didn't have a great understanding of the Middle East, and that there were even any Christians there at all. So I think just spreading an awareness about what, like, the Maronite identity is, and the history of Lebanon, I think would be a great starting point. So yeah, I don't know if that answers your question, but
I would add just one thing to that. Just that it's a different thing than what Henry just said. When I have started talking to Henry's sisters and to his mother, my wife, they have really enjoyed looking at pictures and video and Instagram of Lebanon and seeing how beautiful it is, and seeing how delicious the food looks. And even though it's a different way of coming at it for them, I don't know if it's just because they're women or, just their personality, but that was really important to them. And, I think that it's critical to kind of hit that on both fronts, because there is a sense of a love that you start to have when you can see the beauty of the place itself, and that it draws your heart in. So I think that is an important thing to add and keep in mind as well.
Yeah, thank you very much, Clay. I can see that your sister Autumn is listening to us. Do you think she, if I invited her for a minute or two, do you think she would be able to share her own experience? She would want to add anything? Clay, can you hear me?
yeah, I'm not sure what's going on with my dad. But I have my aunt's number. I'm sure she would be interested if she's listening in and speaking. So I can I think she would be willing.
Okay, I'm going to give her the mic. I'll invite her to speak, but then again, no pressure. If she'd rather not, that's fine. And then I will conclude our podcast today. Is Henry or Clay? I think we lost Clay. He may still be able to listen to us, but he may not be able to speak. So Henry, you're your dad's representative. Would you like to end with something? I'll give you a minute if you would like to end with anything. Just if you want to leave us with a thought.
Yeah.
And sorry, Henry, to interrupt you. Maybe you can address this thought to children, North American children, being American or Canadian, of Mount Lebanese Maronite descent. And my children are Canadians of Mount Lebanese and Maronite descent. So if you were to address a message to my children, what would you tell them?
I think what I would discuss is, in many ways, just to sum up, I think what's been at the root of this conversation, which is, as you mentioned, understanding the sacrifice that our ancestors went through to give us an opportunity here in America or in Canada, and to realize that that came from, a place of deep love for their children, and from a place of deep faith that can be traced back to the incredible history of the Maronite and the Maronite people in Mount Lebanon. Again, as I've said it's been an incredibly compelling thing for me to learn about that and sort of understand it fully and bring it more fully into my awareness of myself and the world. To recognize that is an important part of where I come from and my roots. America and Canada as well are made up to a very large degree of immigrants who came here to give their children a better chance. And so I think I think that resonates very much for Americans to. It's a very powerful thing to understand that the sacrifices that those who came here endured, and it's a very beautiful thing that I think is compelling, as my father mentioned, in a sense that it makes you want to give back, and to give as well and to sacrifice for others. So that's what I think I would end with.
Great ending. Thank you very much, Henry. And a big thank you to the Hanna's father and son for being with us today.
Yeah, thank you. And I think my father's phone died. I think that's the issue. So apologies for that on his behalf.
Yeah, of course. And the great thing about this podcast is it's going to go up on Spotify and on YouTube as well.
Great.
On Kfarhay Capital Radio Mount Lebanon, and I'll share with you the links so he can catch up on what he missed. Henry, thank you.
Thank you. Thank you for having me today.
Before we close, I want to end with absolute clarity about what we are witnessing today. The joint US-Israeli strike are not just another round. They are a decisive blow aimed at the heart of the Iranian Islamic regime. And with the killing of Iran's supreme leader, the regime's collapse is no longer a theory, it is imminent. And for us in Mount Lebanon, this matters directly, because Iran did not only build a regime at home, it exported a system of control outward. And Lebanon has been one of its primary victims. For more than 4 decades, the Lebanese Republic has been parasitized and captured through Shiite proxy power backed by Tehran. That means a window is opening, maybe a rare one, a large window, but windows don't stay open forever. The question is, do we have the awareness, the will, and the unity to seize the opportunity? Because if we do, we can finally begin breaking free from the bondage of a Lebanese Republic, and we can start moving back toward our original entity, Mount Lebanon. And here is the deeper point. With a free and independent Mount Lebanon, the story does not end at the borders. It reaches every Maronite and every Christian of Mount Lebanese descent across the world. It means that those who were scattered, whether decades ago or a century ago, can claim citizenship, reconnect, and return to their ancestral land after so many eras where foreign forces invaded, settled, and pushed our people away from their villages, their churches, and their homes. Now is the time to claim what is rightfully ours, no matter where we live today. And I want to end with a line we all know in Lebanese. Dam ma bisir mai. Our blood doesn't become water. Our belonging to our faith, to our people, and to the land of Mount Lebanon is not temporary. It is not seasonal. It is eternal. So let this not pass like every other moment that came and went. This is the opening. This is the rupture in the old order. This is the chance to organize, unite, and act with discipline and courage, and to take the first real steps back to Mount Lebanon. This is Fred from Kfarhay Capital Radio, Mount Lebanon, and I see you next week. Stay rooted in Mount Lebanon. Stay Mount Lebanese.
البيت خاله عيلت وقدم بمديلخ سغدت ملكش ما يونو حصولي خلدا حطيت لوخ ملكش ما يونو حصولا خلدا حطيت صلاة وعليمة الموران قالوهم قابل قربون أخورت رحم علي المجد للآب والابن والروح القدس من الآن وإلى الأبد آمين. أهلنا يا ربنا يسوع المسيح في هذا الأحد المبارك أن نسبح قيامتك بقلب طاهر وضمير نقي، ونشكرك مع أبناء البيعة المقدسة، ونمجدك وأباك وروحك القدوس الآن وإلى الأبد آمين. السلام للبيعة ولبنيها.